one of the things I think people forget when they're doing, sort of, especially if you're 19 or 20-year-olds, but don't forget about IRA money, right? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that don't know that they can actually take their IRA money and lend it to you. And especially if they're a little bit uncertain about the stock market these days, it may even be a relative or a friend that may have not even realize they've gotten money that they can access. And if they can loan it to you at 10%, and secured in first position, super secured, that's a source of capital that I think is often overlooked.
That's a good point. And I think, it's funny, that young man that was in here, he was saying that the guy he bought it from didn't want to sell the property and have to realize all that capital gain. And he also didn't want his kids to have to deal with the management. And so what he did was an owner financing and had the payments through the installment, like Eric said, to the kids' trusts. And that worked really well because they got a reoccurring, they would get the property back, of course, if he defaulted. But they were getting these reoccurring payments. He doesn't have to manage, doesn't have to mess around with the property at all, and the management and all the things associated with that, because they had never been involved before. So that's a really astute question, good one. And also on the IRA, I believe they have to move it to a self-directed first. Is that correct?
100%, yeah. So if you've got it in a traditional IRA, that's not going to work, but it's not complicated at all to open up what's called a self-directed IRA, where you are the one that's actually directing the IRA of what investments you make. Because the traditional IRAs, the broker that you're working with, they only get paid if there's a commission. And so they're not really in the business of, even though it's legal for them to invest in real estate or precious metals or oil and gas or syndications even. We have a lot of clients who use IRA money for their syndication. Those are all legal. The challenge is, for the traditional IRA, the broker that's helping you out, they don't get paid on those things. They only get paid if you buy a stock or a mutual fund. And so a lot of times that's what you're limited to in a traditional IRA. But if you go to and there's several of them, if you go to a self-directed transfer, you open an account in the self-directed IRA, transfer your money from your traditional to your self-directed, you can then dictate to the IRA custodian, hey, IRA custodian, I want you to make a loan to Eric at 10%. Here's the note, sign it. Or, hey, I want you to go buy precious metals or real estate or whatever it is. And that's something that a lot of people don't know about. I really think it's worth getting educated on that if you have an IRA. And if you are looking for money, that's a good source to educate those folks as to that option and maybe even help them walk through that process, because then ultimately they're going to have access to that capital that person didn't even know they thought they couldn't even touch until they were 65.
Yeah, it's a huge up and coming industry, as we all know. And just think about this, guys. Like your employer traditionally has a 401k that they're matching, let's say, and you're plugging money away with some financial broker, whoever it is. And you don't realize that you do have options, and you do. You literally can take that money and move it from that financial advisor to a self-directed, and it is literally self-directed. So it's like moving it to your own bank account and then doing what you want with it. And, most of the world is set up. I know in Australia, it's called the superannuation. And in Canada, it's called the Retirement Savings Plan, the RSP. And you have that option there. But in the U.S., it's basically your 401k is traditionally managed by Wall Street. And so there's you should know that, because what also happens is there's an educational component. Like, I guarantee you, my brother and my sister do not know anything about a self-directed IRA. I guarantee it. They've been taught to just have that money go into a 401k through their employers, let's say, forever. And it's built and built and built and built, and it's been managed by their financial advisor. If they knew that, they could use that money, move it to self-directed, and then basically do what you want with it. You do have to keep it in the self-directed name, because I've done this, where you move it, and then it's, let's say it's Ken McElroy self-directed IRA. That money goes in that way, comes back out that way, so you can't really go to you personally, because it's still sitting in this retirement piece, right?
Yeah, correct. So the same limitations, the limitations are more on who you can deal with, the self-dealing limitation. So I can't lend money to my brother or my dad or my spouse or make an investment. I can't buy a piece of property and live in it myself. So it's got to be separate and distinct. But there are very few investments that you cannot make, which generally don't even apply to us. You can't invest in banks or collectible is a bummer for me because I'm a huge wine guy, so I'd love to be able to use, and I had a way to buy a wine and then do my collection, so I can't do that. But other than that, most investments that you're thinking of that potentially doing, that there's money there for you to access. And again, I think from an investor standpoint, I mean, I remember you and I, Kenny, talking about this years ago, that if we had to do this all over again and we were 19 or 20, just doing, back then it was doing seminars on this, or now maybe starting a podcast or doing some content about this idea of educating people, that will open up and unlock a ton of capital, because a lot of people don't want to have some people do, but a lot of people don't want to have their money locked into the stock market, and they would love to go lend it on a piece of property, or even actually go buy a single family residence and rent it out and get the rental income. But again, the rental income goes to your custodian, to your IRA. It doesn't come to you, but it goes into your IRA and it continues to grow, inside that IRA. And, for many people, it's a better option.
You got it.